Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm so pleased to be joined by my friend Trish Alegre-Smith, who is an owner and principal photographer of Photography by Trish. She's also an Air Force spouse, veteran spouse now. Like
Yes.
your husband just recently retired, so congratulations to
Yes.
you.
Thank
I
you.
know a lot of people in our community know you because you have photographed nearly everyone.
Yes.
But before we get into that, let's talk about your journey because you started as a member of the Air Force and then
Yes.
you transitioned from the Air Force Reserve to being a military spouse. So let's tell us your story.
So I had the unexpected transition. I always knew that I was going to, we're going to stay together as a family, no matter where we were, what we were doing. And so I had transitioned from the active duty to the reserve so that I could move wherever my active duty spouse was. What I didn't expect was have to do a sudden transition from the active reserve into being a full-time mom and a military spouse. That came in after our son was born, lack of childcare where we were stationed, and we just could not make it work, no matter what we tried. And so I spent 3 years as a full-time stay-at-home mom. And I say that even though I was a stay-at-home mom, I was never at home. I was a full-time volunteer. Any
Yeah.
place I could take my kid with me, that's where I went because I knew that I wanted to interact with peers. I needed to get out. And that's actually how I found and entered into the business opportunity I have today. Because I just did something that was a hobby, wanted to get out and be with my peers. Somebody recognized that, hey, you're really good. Do you think you can help me out? I'm not going to make contracts. Somebody fell out on me. So I went ahead and did that, jumped at that chance. And those chances just kept coming because I was the person that showed up.
So really quickly though, what were you doing in the Air Force, Trish?
So I started off in aircraft maintenance, working on the flight line with fighters, F-15 C&D models, and then I went into acquisitions as a program manager. So I call that the professional shopper of advanced weapon systems.
So did you think you were gonna find a way to go from acquisitions or contracting into or weapon systems into, did you think you were gonna do that when you
Yeah.
transitioned?
I thought I was going to be go into a government contract, the support contractor. There's many different organizations out there. And I really thought I was going to do that, if not full time, at least part time. So it really surprised me that I actually ended up in a business, let alone one that was in a creative space.
So then what precipitated that? Was it the opportunities or was it the flexibility or what was
It
it?
was both. It was both the opportunities, that people wanted me to work. They recognized that I had something, and most of it is because, as I mentioned before, I literally showed up. There's so many people that just dropped out. I showed up when I was asked to show up, and I delivered as expected. I really didn't think it was that difficult to do, but apparently that was a unique thing. Definitely in event photography and in real estate photography, actually showing up and delivering. And they just kept asking me. The other part was flexibility. Because of the type of assignments I was taking on, I could take them on when I could find childcare or as the kids were starting to go to school. And then I could also pick it up and flex with my active duty member's schedule. So I wasn't tied to a single 9 to 5. In reality, I actually end up working more hours than I would if I was at a regular, corporate job.
Yeah, no, I get that. I always tell people that if you want to be really busy, just volunteer because
Yeah.
like as a volunteer, you think you have like so much time. And I'm like, I was less busy when I started getting paid to work than I was as a volunteer. So I absolutely
Yes, because when you're paid to work, your time is tracked.
right. And so you're like, oh, it's time to clock out. It's time for family time. But like when you're a volunteer, you're like, it all mingles. But I want to talk about something you said about always showing up. Do you think that it was because of your experience with government contracting as such that you understood more about the other side of the contracting world, where when you were the vendor and then like you knew that they needed you to be there and that you knew that they were on the hook for it. And so I think, and I have to think that for somebody who's managing the government contract,
Oh,
having
yes.
consistency is everything. And
Yes.
so do you think that's what,
Yeah. I
that's what
mean,
got your
for
initial.
me, it didn't make any sense to me to agree to a contract and not be able to fulfill it. and or at least make the best attempt that you can. Things will happen where there'll be such, some circumstances out of your control, or even if you have a contract, the expectations don't necessarily match the contract language. But to just not show up and not to finish, not to complete at all, that really astounded me. And I just never thought that that was even a possibility, especially when you're working on your own. You don't have any other top cover. This is all you. And so that was because I understood that. I think that's why more and more people were hiring me, even though I know I am not the best photographer out there. I've had years of experience now, so I'm really good at certain things. But definitely when I was starting out, I know I wasn't the best out there, but I delivered a product that was good enough.
And you
And that,
showed up.
yes, and I showed up.
Yeah, no, I have to think that's like, I think that, I mean, just me looking on the outside in, it seems like that would be something that would make you, that would give you that competitive advantage, was that you
Yes.
understood the person you were working with, where you're like, oh, I was you. So
Mhm.
I understand what your expectations are, and I'm able to fulfill those expectations. No, I love that. So I know that, you guys have recently transitioned out of the military, but I want to talk about your transition
Oh
from
my
being
goodness.
in the Air Force to being a military spouse. I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, is there anything you would do differently to prepare for that transition? And then we'll talk about your transition, you guys'
Oh, yes, the second one, transition number two. So,
yeah.
transition number one, when I unexpectedly transitioned out of the Air Force Reserve into being a military spouse full time, I I would have told myself way back when, hey, while you're still in uniform, you should prepare for transition because you never know when it's going to happen.
At
You
what stage? I guess I want to be specific. Like, what stage would you
Oh,
tell?
I would have started in year one.
Okay.
And in year one, it would have been just maintaining the networks outside of the military, outside of the government space. And these are networks from people that have like interests, networks from college, even networks back in the old neighborhoods and high school, or going further back, just to keep in touch with people. I think I was good at least at Christmas to remember to send out the holiday cards, but really checking in. I think if we had LinkedIn back then when I first started, it would be a lot easier. But just checking in with folks. Hey, what are you up to? Dropping that random note
Yeah.
to people, and then starting to ask questions about what other people are doing, just to keep the aperture open as to what other networking opportunities or other career opportunities are out there when the time came.
Right.
So I would know, do I really need that master's degree or should I do this instead? It'll still help me with my promotion, but it will also set me up for transition.
Or maybe even like continuing education, like, hey, maybe I need
Yes.
certification or, like,
Yes.
yeah, no, that's a great, because I know a lot of people don't think about transition until it's almost too late. And so
Yes.
I think you're absolutely right. Like, if you have LinkedIn, especially now, nobody has an excuse because everybody should have LinkedIn if they're able to, unless it's, a violation of their operational security or personal security, then don't do it. But if you're able to have LinkedIn, you should definitely have it, because the great thing is everybody updates their own LinkedIn. So that
Yes.
means that your networks are constantly being updated, so it's easier to stay up to date.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think you're very smart. Like, you should do it from day one, not because you're going to get out from day one, but because
No.
it's easier to maintain those connections if you just get in the habit of maintaining them throughout the whole career.
And people remember you.
Yeah.
And you're giving them updates as to what you're doing too. So you're planting that seed in their minds so that when you're ready, they will think, oh, we have an opportunity coming up. Why don't you at least take a look at it? And they can either mentor you or even sponsor you into that opportunity.
Yeah. So do you have any other things that you would do differently?
I think I would have asked people who'd already transitioned what it was like. I think I would have talked to more people who went through that versus, trying to do it all on my own. I felt myself in that funk or just not sure what I was going to do afterwards, and I didn't know who to reach out to. I think that's the one thing I think it would have been a smoother transition, or at least I would have had a lot more support if I had known people who had gone through what I had just gone through.
So now you're that person. So
Yes,
like, you're the
I
person who's
am.
gone through it. So do you have any, I mean, we'll talk about the second transition later, but do you have any specific advice for military spouse professionals out there who also happen to be veterans?
For me, the first thing is recognizing that when we were on in uniform, we didn't always pay attention to the resources available to military spouses. Everything, was geared towards us as being on active duty and then how to transition as a veteran. But many of those things don't apply if we are continuing to live a military lifestyle as a military spouse. And to start looking at what resources are out there specifically for military spouses. And many of them are through nonprofit organizations, through other government agencies, even, and maybe even through each of the services they might have their own, but to actually make a conscious effort, realize that whatever we were offered as veterans doesn't necessarily apply in every case when we're trying to maintain a career across moves and in my case, flex to an active duty spouse's schedule.
No, that's smart. And then I know that there are a lot of resources out there for veterans. And so a lot of the veterans I've spoken to, if they happen to be military spouses, are like, I never even thought about looking at military spouse resources. I'm like, well,
Yep.
you're eligible for both. And like,
Yes.
and I was reading your profile and you had mentioned like, don't forget the state and county resources as
Yes.
well. And I mean, I was guilty of that as a military spouse. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, we have really good, like in Fairfax County where we both live, we have really good county resources. And so, we always get so pigeonholed into looking at
On the
resources
national level.
specific. Yeah, that I'm like, no, we should get deeper in the weeds and look at those resources, especially now where, federal resources are getting cut and everything. But I still find that there's still the state and local resources. So yes, great tip. And I know that you're a planner, but do you have a specific ritual for goal setting or prepping for the year ahead?
I have to set aside time every year, but I can't do it by myself. I have realized I need an accountability partner and I need people who do follow up on me. So making time for a corporate retreat. I know here at NMSN we try to do that at least once every 2 years or so. Making time for that corporate retreat where we can actually do goal setting, or I join an accelerator or a workshop that's specifically for other business owners, and
Yeah.
all we do is really set goals for 1 year out, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years out. And really look at everything from our, unique value proposition, mission statement, vision statement, and make sure they still resonate with where we want to go next.
Yeah, it's exactly as you said. They're not evergreen. Like you should be
No.
that like pretty regularly on the regular, like at least once a year, you should be looking at that. And I mean, and I know that when we talk about financial projections for our businesses,
Oh yeah.
we people look at that quarterly, right? So
Yes, because
that's
we have to
good.
pivot a lot.
So I'm going to pick your brain additionally because like you guys just like literally just went through the transition. Like your husband just retired from the military. And I mean, were there any lessons learned there? I mean, because these conversations are being brought to us by our friends at USAA and they have like so many resources for transition. So I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, this is a great opportunity to ask Trish about their transition because, it's like it was a recent memory. So like having just gone through it, what did you learn? What did you wish you knew beforehand?
So thank you to USAA because one of the things I actually did before we transitioned was do their financial review. You can do it online through your account, and yes, and you should do it not just for both spouses should be doing it to see where we are in terms of retirement and in terms of what we have for emergencies, because that helped us realize that my husband could take some time off when he retired. It's really important to have that transition time. He could take time off and I could afford to support him.
Yeah,
So plug for importance of a military spouse career to be able to do that without us going into savings.
right.
The other part, I had, being having my own career and having my own business, I've been networking. I've been, expanding my network, seeking opportunities. He didn't start till probably, maybe closer to 4 to 6 months out of in earnest, really starting that networking. And most of it came when he started his SkillBridge internship. But the only thing about SkillBridge is that, many times you'll be networking with the folks that you're interning with at the company that you're at, and not necessarily going and doing networking opportunities on a wider scale. You just may not have the time because you're trying to do so many things at once right before you transition. So I think I would have pushed for stronger networking for him further up front.
But I was really happy that he would come to NMSN events. And so he was
Yes.
learning, like he was actually very earnestly listening to like a lot of the sessions. And a lot of our NMSN members, they would bring their spouses and do that because, it was like a very passive way for them to get the information because it wasn't being delivered like, you need this. It was, hey, just come hang out with me and,
Yes. It's, and that's where
meet
it
you.
should be.
And
It should be, right? Networking. It's just you are just getting to know people who have similar interests and are in similar life stages.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I know that in closing, I always give everybody an opportunity to choose their question, but I'm going to choose yours
Okay.
because your story style is one that hasn't been told yet because we have a lot of military spouses doing great things. But I think you're not the first veteran spouse I've hired that I've interviewed, but you're the first one who's spoken specifically to the experience of going from being, like a military member to be
Hmm.
a military spouse. So I think my question to you will be specific to that experience. Like, if you could give top three lessons learned or top three tips for somebody who sees themselves going through that transition, what would that be?
So the first tip is to remember who you are. You know, the being a military member, being a military spouse, that is a stage of life that we're in that does not define who we are as a person. Underneath all of that, we have specific skill sets, we have specific values, and we have a personality that shines through, that enables us to be successful no matter where we're placed, whether we're still on active duty, whether we become a reserve, or we're a military spouse, or in my case, a veteran spouse. Who I am underneath has never changed.
Right.
So that would be the first thing is really know yourself and be confident in yourself. The second thing is to embrace the skills that you learn at each step. We're very experienced with transition. To go from the military active duty life to being a military spouse, we've already done our first transition. And then we transition under very difficult circumstances. So we should be confident that we can guide our current active duty spouse who's retiring or separating through their transition, and that we're confident that we know what we're going to expect. And that, the advice that we give comes from a place of not just love, but also from a place of real hard won experience.
Yeah.
Because we would have gone through all of the emotions already, and somehow we have succeeded, especially those of us who are professionals or own a business. We would have already succeeded. We've already seen the pain points and we would have gotten through it. So we need to be able to share that experience, but also have the grace to understand that our partner is going to go through that as well. And then the third tip would be to embrace whatever measure of success that we have for ourselves. And it's going to look different at each spot. When it's time for that final transition or that next transition to either retirement or separation, and now you're on the civilian side, now we can go from that measure of success being, hey, we've been able to keep that career or business going through the moves, through all of the different demands placed on our schedule, all the unexpected changes. Now we can actually do things like, in my case, oh, I'm ready for the next growth phase of my business. And it's actually going to have this dollar amount attached to it. So, but be comfortable with that.
Like you
We
can
were
scale.
yes, that we can scale, but we be comfortable with wherever you are. You have a measure of success, and none of it was wrong. That your the measure of success came at the time you needed it to.
Yeah, and it's constantly moving. Like it's going to
Yes, it
change.
is.
But
Yeah.
I'm gonna also gonna ask you to foot stomp what you said earlier about like the financial readiness.
Oh
Um,
my goodness,
there
yes.
is there a tip you would have on that?
If you can get a financial planner to work with you, there's many different ways of doing that. I know USAA has something that you can have. They also have automated tools through the account. Really start looking. You can never start too early. So that you can see what you have in your savings, how to do a budget, how much do you actually need to make, and how much does your lifestyle cost. It's all about the loving our numbers, and it
Know your
applies.
numbers, love your numbers.
Know our numbers, and that applies in our personal life as well as it does in our professional life. Really know your numbers. And you shouldn't be afraid of that. I think a lot of people, they just are like, okay, we can afford it, or it's good enough, we can cover all the bills. But you want to do more than just cover the bills. You really want to put money away so that you can fulfill either a goal, a dream, or you can be able to give, your member who's transitioning at least a month or two before they really have to get back into working again.
Well, not only that, but there might even be a delay in payments, like a
Oh,
delay.
yes, there is. Oh, yeah. Because
Yeah.
we all know, of course, that happens. It never quite works out.
Yeah, so you should be prepared for that. So I love that because like we went through the transition a long time ago, and I think that was the best tip we got was like just have like if you can 6 months worth of living expenses. But if
Yes.
you can't, you should have at least 3 months.
Yes.
I think 6 months is hard for anybody,
It
but
is. It's really
three
hard.
months, I think like you can feel somewhat confident if you can have 3 months.
Yes.
But well, thank you so much, Trish, and thank you to your
You're
friends at
welcome.
USAA for making this conversation possible. And if you guys have a story to tell, I hope you will. Well, like submit your own military spouse employment story, and we would love to share it. And Trish, as always, it was a pleasure talking to you. And if you have questions for Trish, they can find you on LinkedIn and they can find you on Facebook, right?
Yes.
Give them your handles.
So on Facebook at So Your Life, SOYOURLIFE, and on Instagram at So Your Life One. And then I'm also on LinkedIn.
At Trish Alegre-Smith.
Yes.
So if you have questions for her, drop them in the comments. We will get them to her, or go find her different social media handles and go spam her, not spam her, go ask her over there. But thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Trish. And I hope you guys come back next week for another inspirational story. Bye, guys.